Hello and welcome to another segment of the East Brunswick Advisory Health Council's Wellness Spotlight. Who do you think would be most likely to use a coach? If you're like most people, you'd probably say athletes. From the elementary school level to the Olympics to the pros, athletes use coaching to improve their performance. But athletes aren't the only ones who use coaching. More and more individuals are hiring executive coaches, leadership coaches, and life coaches to help identify and remove the barriers to their personal and professional success. Working with the right coach can be a thought-provoking and creative process. It inspires a person with the right mindset and strategies needed to maximize their personal and professional potential, be more successful, and have the best life possible. In the Wellness Spotlight today is a man who specializes in taking businesses and individuals from good to great, professional coach Michael Sleppin. Mike Sleppin is a graduate of Gettysburg College and Hofstra University. He has a degree in economics and master's degrees in business administration and in management and finance. Mike is a senior partner at Paradigm Associates, a New Jersey-based organization that's been working with client organizations to improve business results. He's worked with companies in 27 different industries, including service companies, manufacturing companies, transportation and distributor organizations. Mike writes business columns concerning quality, sales and marketing, strategic planning, and management effectiveness that are published and read in the United States and Canada. He's helped companies double revenue, increase profit margins, reduce employee turnover, develop effective sales force compensation plans, and focus on critical issues instead of dealing with day-to-day, event-to-event matters. He's been an instructor at the college level in management and leadership. Previously, Mike was Chief Operating Officer of a manufacturing company. As such, he has both domestic and international business experience. He's a member of numerous professional organizations and contributes his business and personal development expertise pro bono to local religious, not-for-profit organizations. Mike, welcome to the Wellness Spotlight.
And it's a pleasure to be here.
Mike, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Grew up until I was 17. In New York City, went to the oldest public high school in the United States, which was purchased by the city of Brooklyn from the Dutch Reformed Church in about 1788. Then went off to college in Pennsylvania, then went into the military, and when I came out, then got a master's and MBA at night and started to work. Spent most of my professional life when I was working for people with two companies. I spent about 16 years with one, 14 years with another, both in the same industry, which was in the printed circuit board assembly and fabrication industries, and rose to the position of Chief Operating Officer. And I always joke, I say, since my level of incompetence has no limits, I did business from Moscow to Hong Kong and points in between. As you know, the definition of an expert is someone who's 300 miles from home, so I became an expert. And then later, I started consulting and coaching practice, met a fellow, and we hooked up back in '89, and have been doing that ever since.
And you were an East Brunswick resident for a while.
Spent 27 years here. All my three children graduated from the school system here. I might say my son, who's the eldest, started the family tradition and flunked kindergarten. However, today he's got 4 college degrees, including a PhD. So I guess flunking kindergarten is not the end of the world.
How did you go from managing, being the CEO of a successful company, to doing the coaching work that you do? Well,
you know, life has many obstacles that sometimes stand in the road, and you have to decide how to deal with it. My first wife, Louise, died many years ago in her 40s, and the children were still in school, and I couldn't run around the world. I wanted to be a dad. So I went over to Route 18, bought a $39 phone, had no desk, had no computer, just pull up a chair to the end of my bed and started dialing, and I said if I could get 3 appointments a day, 4 days a week, 40 weeks a year, I figure if I can get in front of 400 executives, that a dozen ought to hire me the first year, and that's exactly what happened.
And you coach all different types of businesses.
Yes. worked in many, many businesses. The one common ingredient is they all have people. And generally, people will hire you when they hurt enough to hire you. If I walk in and talk to a company principal or even someone who might be considering coaching, but let's say the company principal says our sales are up 50% every half hour and managers came from heaven, they don't need you. But when they realize that they have problems that they can't successfully and effectively address themselves, they then start to look to the outside. And the one promise I made to myself when I started the business, and I never changed, I said I will never work with any company or person where I'm wishing for their success more than they want it.
That's right. You can't want it more than them.
That's right. And unless people really, really want to make the changes, there's the trite phrase that you can't do the same thing on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday and expect a different outcome on Friday. And so I have a definition that a rut is a coffin with the ends knocked out. And if you can find what I call Sherwood Forest, which is large enough to live off, small enough to defend, you can do whatever you want. As I mentioned before, I did business all over the world. I know why some people did what they did in places like Slovakia or the Soviet Union. They had no choice. In America, if you make the commitment and it's important enough, you can do anything you want to do. Now, children think they can have everything. Adults know they can't have everything. But if you really focus, you can have one thing. And in a sense, I'm a living example of that by going from a very successful career. In fact, I will say, other than the first couple of years of entry-level flunky work, I never did anything that I never wanted to do. My goal was never to be the richest guy in a cemetery. It was to enjoy what I did, because when you enjoy it, it works. I was hired by an accounting firm on Long Island, and I would meet with them once a week. And about 4 weeks into the program, they said, "Mike, let us really tell you why we hired you. You have a passion for what you do that you exude. We don't. And we thought we could learn why you have a passion and why we don't, in addition to anything else that you would."
They were hoping your enthusiasm would be contagious. Would you say that individuals have the same types of issues that companies have? Or would you say that the trend is towards different types of things that each entity would need to confront?
The details may be different, but what is similar is they all have to address change. 500 years ago, I suppose a grandfather or grandmother could sit down with a child and a grandchild on a log and they could talk to each other and understand each other. Today, a 25-year-old can't talk to a 12-year-old. I mean, if we think that Facebook didn't exist except 9 years ago, the world has changed. And if you don't embrace it, you're going to be run over. Look at people's careers, look at businesses, and look at empires. They rise because they correctly address the situations. The world changes. They don't either they don't see it, or they do see it but don't want to make the changes or don't know how. And then they pour more and more money and effort into doing less and less, and they're gone.
So as a professional coach, then how do you work with people who have issues dealing with change?
Okay. I start out and say, whether I'm working with an individual or a company, it's their life, it's their values. I'm not there to change their life or their values. I use what we learned was the Socratic method. For example, the first question I ask, I said, if I were a magician, and when I left this meeting, I waved a magic wand over the building, and all the things you wanted in the next 6 or 12 months happened, what would they be? And I just start writing down. Will Rogers said, ride the horse in the direction it's going. So the question then, what are the obstacles standing in the way? From their answers, you'll learn if they really understand the obstacles or only guessing at the obstacles. But you're saying, what is impossible to do today, but if you could do it tomorrow and the next day, would change your life for the better. And that's true if you're an individual let's say I've worked with individuals trying to start consulting and training businesses. And then I've worked with companies with many, many people. Most of the companies I've worked with are privately owned companies. And the best success story I had, I worked with a company that actually had done some construction work in East Brunswick on Route 18 going into New Brunswick. When I started with them, they were 31 million. But the president, who was all of 31, was willing to learn. The last time I looked, they were over 700 million. Because they saw that what they were doing, the critical difference is the behavior of the people in the organization. One-on-one, the critical difference is you. So whether it's one person or 101 people, how do you get people to behave as if they're volunteers instead of a bunch of conscripts? What has to happen? Attitude is altitude. Attitude is want to or not want to. People who say I can and people who say I can't are generally both right. So more than knowledge and skills. Skills is how to do something. Knowledge is what to do something. But attitude is want to do something. I mentioned earlier that I got into this business because my wife had died in her 40s and so on. Well, I wanted her to see a particular oncologist. I called the oncologist's office, and the woman says, Dr. So-and-so is not taking any new patients. 40 minutes later, I arrived. She says, who are you? I told her. I said, well, I told you he's not taking any new patients. I said, I heard you. I sat down on the couch facing her window for 3 hours and 10 minutes. And finally, she said, all right, he'll talk to you for 10 minutes. He talked to me for 45 minutes, took her as a patient, and kept her alive another year. Would I sit for 3 hours plus for a lot of other things? No. But you have to decide what's important to you.
So is that the basis of motivating people towards change, Mike? Because, you know, everybody knows what's good for them. I think most people would recognize that their life would improve if they did certain things. The heads of companies know that they'd be more profitable or serve more people if they'd have more abundance.
Yes.
You know, or more of the things they really want in their life.
Right.
It would be better if they did certain things. But there's still something that holds them back. You know, they say comfort comes as a guest, it lingers as a host, and it stays to enslave you.
Right.
So the idea of comfort, being more comfortable, really outweighs the benefits of being able to confront what needs to be done to make the changes that are necessary to bring about that change. Yeah. So how do you coach people through that?
Okay, a couple of things. You can't motivate a single person, either can I. Each of us has our own attitudes and our own motivation. So as I said earlier, they have to hurt enough. For example.
So you think people are best motivated when they move away from consequences?
Well, they have to see what the consequences are. For example, I worked with a company on different projects over 3 years. And again, there are things they'll tell you when they first meet you, and then they'll really tell you the truth later. This president of a company, who's one of the two best presidents of companies I ever worked with, he and his partner had sons in the business. And he said to me, Michael, I'm 59 years old. No one in my family has ever lived past 70. I don't want to die in this chair. I want to know if any of these kids are able to take over the company. And so I put them through certain tests and so on. And I gave him an answer, which he said, I know you're right. I said, not one of them is able to run this company right now. But I believe this one could be helped with this, and this. So he had me do individual coaching. And then we rotated them, okay, this month you're in engineering, next month you're in sales. And we found out what they were good at and what they were bad at. And frankly, after a year, we still agreed not one of them was good enough to be president and take over. So then we said, how can we bring someone into the company that will share the values of the principles and so on? And that's what they did. But it really started out, the hurt was, that's why I say selling someone to do something is hurt and rescue. The issue was, I don't want to die in this chair. And as a matter of fact, after he made some of the changes, he and his wife bought a summer home in North Carolina and he started to enjoy all the years he had put into this business.
Mike, we've spent a lot of time talking about companies.
Yes.
There's a lot of people that are out of work.
Right.
Or they're working in jobs that they really don't like.
Right.
What would you say to these people?
Well, it's interesting you ask me because I have worked with unemployed people. And what I used is the sales process. They're not selling this cup of water. They're selling themselves. And why do I know a lot about that? Because I'm selling myself, not what I do. And again, we met 3 hours a day over in a place in Milltown. And they got to understand no one cares what you do. People buy successful outcomes. So I even said on your resume, or suggested on your resume, if you put something that I know how to do this, this, and this, then put dash, and the outcome for you will be that, that, and that. And if you can't, get it off your resume. When you talk to people, do the same thing that I do. Ask the interviewer if you hired me. And 6 months later, you said to me, you know, so-and-so, you're the best person I ever hired in my life for this position. Why would you say that? What would have happened that benefits you and your organization? So, just as, for example, I work with a lot of personal service organizations. I work in sales with accounting firms, engineering firms, most of whom can't sell $5 bills for $1. That's not their training, that's not their personality. Well, a lot of people looking for jobs in this very tough economy don't know how to sell themselves. They might as well walk outside the building with a billboard, tuna fish $6.95. Because all they do is repeat things that every other candidate has repeated, which is I did this, so hire me. My question to people listening to our conversation is before you go in on the next interview, ask yourself, is anything I'm doing in that interview unique? Because if it's not, you're not going to get the job. I hired lots and lots of people. And selfishly, people who hire people ask, how is this person going to make my life easier? And by the way, every time I walk in, do I have to shudder to ask, how are things today? A business is not a social agency. They're not hiring because you don't have a job. They're hiring because you're going to add value to the lives of other people in that organization. And if they don't see that in the interview, you're finished, even if you're Einstein.
I think what can undermine the process is that typically in our culture, there's an adversarial relationship that tends to exist between management and labor. So everybody's first thinking about their own position because they're afraid that their interests aren't going to be met, their needs aren't going to be met. Whereas in the East, in the Asian cultures, there's a partnership that exists between management and labor.
Right.
So do you think that that's something that's here to stay with us? Do you think that that's something that has to evolve as time goes on? And how do companies and how do employees work in that type of climate to be for their own betterment and also for the betterment of one another?
Okay. Stephen Covey, who wrote some classics, wrote once, seek first to understand before you seek to be understood. So even though there may be different goals on the part of owners, managers, and labor, someone who's applying for a job, labor, should spend time figuring and then asking in the interview, what is in the interest of these people? It gets back to what's going to make me unique, because if I don't understand, and even though we may have different goals, There's no way, even if I'm hired, that I'll ever stay there or get a raise if I'm not adding value to that business.
And vice versa, if the company's not adding value to the employees' lives,
right,
they're not going to stay. They'll jump ship.
The best definition of a manager is someone who builds people and helps them to become successful. A manager's job is not a fellow or a gal standing there with a whip lashing people, because that doesn't work in these days. Maybe it worked when I started to work years ago, but it doesn't work today.
Well, that's an interesting point, Mike. The days of the dictatorial type leader, the General Patton, the blood and guts type leader are gone. It's now the style is more of a benevolent leader, one who leads by example.
Yes. There's a fellow, and his name slips my mind, Chainsaw Al. They made him president of Sunbeam. He destroyed the company. He may have done, when he went to graduate school, gotten great grades, but he was a terrible manager and a leader. Leaders do the right things so that managers can do things right.
What are some of the traits and characteristics of leadership that could help prospective employees, add value to a company and can also help a company serve more people?
That's a complex question. The leader has to have a vision for the organization and share the vision with the employees. For example, I mentioned this company that went from 31 million to 700 something. One of the first projects we did was strategic thinking, business planning. And the first thing you do in that is a vision. Well, 6 or 8 months later, because I said if this vision and plan never get out of this room, it's useless. They got all 200 employees in a warehouse location. The president of the company got up, PowerPoint, this is our vision, this is where we're going, and 7 key managers got up and said, this is what we're going to accomplish in order to get closer to the vision. And then they had a buffet. And I went to the lowest level employees. And I remember one, Marianne so-and-so. Marianne, did you get anything out of this? She said, Mr. Sleppin, I didn't realize when I went boom, 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 typing on my computer, how it related to what I just saw. Now I know why I'm doing that. So it even went down to, if I'm a switchboard operator, that's a task, that's an activity. My job for this company is to be a welcoming ambassador on the telephone. The guy who mopped the floor understood, I'm not someone with a mop. I'm going to make that lobby so clean, it will be the cleanest lobby that any visitor ever came in and saw. That's why.
Showing how everybody contributes.
That everyone with a vision is now empowered.
Yes.
As opposed in World War II, one of the tactics was to wound, not kill a German officer. So 3 or 4 guys would have to run over and help him. And no one below the officer knew what to do. Mike, because that was not their culture.
We've got a couple of minutes left. In the time remaining, what's the process if somebody wants to work with you? Is it different if you're an individual compared to if you're a CEO of a company?
No, it's exactly the same. The first session is an overview of what you can expect from me, what I expect from you, and how we're going to go through this process. And lastly, in that first session, whether you're one person or 15 people, you're going to write down and hand me the sheet and keep one copy for yourself. When we're done, here's what I want to happen. I don't want to be taking a trip to Arkansas if you want to go to Maine.
Right.
And then we meet once a week, spaced repetition. Psychologists say if we're exposed to an idea 6 times, we'll remember it from 15 years to life. And we meet until we're finished with the process.
I see. And typically, how long are your clients with you?
Well, this company I mentioned that went to 700, they were with me for 12 years. Because once I did the strategic planning, I worked with different level of managers. We started a new business. I worked with 11 engineers who had never sold anything. In 2 years, they sold $24 million worth of services, which the president sold for $40 million, that division, to a publicly owned Texas company. On the other hand, if I'm doing individual coaching, it's probably just 8 or 10 weeks and then we're done. However, they can call me at any time, whether it's a year later or 2 years later, as long as I'm still alive and can answer the phone.
And if somebody would like to contact you, Mike, how do they do that?
You can call me at 908-812-2327, 908-812-2327. I also have an email, and the email, but I get to my phone faster, is msleppin, SLEPPIN, at the @, paradymAssociates.us, PARAD as in David, IG as in George, M, associates.us. msleppin at paradymAssociates.us, 908-812-2327.
Thank you, Mike. You know, at a time when so many companies are interested in being more abundant, not only for themselves and their community, but also for their employees, and at a time where so many people are looking for help to be able to find a job or to be able to find a better job to support themselves and their family, it's great that you could share your time to be here today to be able to help our community not only be more abundant, but also be a happier place in which to live. So thank you for joining us today.
I just want to say one thing. I always say to someone, since you don't know me, if after 2 sessions you decide I'm a blooming idiot, I will give you your money back. In almost a quarter of a century, no one's ever asked for
Well, I won't
money
ask
back.
for my money back today, Mike.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
This concludes another segment of the East Brunswick Advisory Health Council's Wellness Spotlight. I'm Dr. Ken Friedman, here with Mike Sleppin, reminding you that wellness works when you work it.